it's just a conversation between you and I. So I will
Okay.
ask you, for sure, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about what do you consider is a man? What's a good man? What do you think the quality of a man should be? Um, there's no doubt that I want to speak about your past as a fighter because, again, like I was saying earlier, I watched you fight many, many times, and yeah, you were as good as it gets from a Muay Thai fighter in America, right?
Some would say that, yeah.
No, I'm saying it. If it sounded
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
question, I apologize.
No,
It
no.
was not a question; it was a comment.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate that, man. I tried my best, and I was fortunate to be able to make it to a high level and do a lot of really great things.
So we'll start with this. What do you consider a good man? What do you think are the qualities of a good man?
Qualities of good man. Um, Honesty. I mean, I think a lot of things we tend to look too much externally without the internal aspect of it. So it's easy to look at someone who might have a lot of money or a position or a lot of friends, and then you automatically we assume, oh, this must be the way to do it. This must be a good person. While really on the inside, everything is being destroyed. They have terrible relationships with their loved ones. They're medicating themselves 24 hours a day, and I think that is one of the unfortunate bigger aspects in life. A lot is we look so much to the outside, disregarding everything internal, and that's kind of what has got us into the situation we're in today. So someone that's honest, not just externally, but honest with themselves. And that's really tough to do, particularly if you don't have someone in your life or something you look to hold you accountable. I always compare it to fighting in that regard, where if you're the best person in your gym, it's hard to
Mhm.
keep yourself motivated and keep pushing yourself. So you got to really go out of your way to make sure you're doing that, because it has to be a conscious decision. Whereas if you have someone in front of you, you have to get better. You have to stay sharp because they're going to put you in a bad spot. So a lot of these lessons you learn um, through fighting translate to every aspect of life, which is, I think, one of the best things about a martial arts or anything like that.
I agree 1,000% with you. I think that any young man out there that either doesn't have a mentor, doesn't have a strong role figure, like a strong man figure in their life, should do martial arts. Well, even if
Yeah,
you do, actually, you should do martial
yeah.
arts because I believe that most of the skills that I've acquired started there.
Oh
The
yeah,
discipline, coachability,
yeah.
knowing how to fail, it's all things that come from martial art. What 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 made you do it in the first place? If you go back to the first time you stepped in a gym, why'd you do it?
Why did it? Okay, basically, because I spent the first half of my life going in the completely opposite direction, destroying myself. I was an alcoholic by the time I was probably 16, full blown alcoholic by the time I was like 16 years old. I started drinking and partying when I was like 12. I was really self destructive, depressed. All these. I mean, obviously, a lot of life events led to that, but. What happened was I always had this dream of wanting to fight. And I don't like to say it was a dream, because it wasn't really something I was like, oh, that's something I'm going to do one day, or had these aspirations of doing something great. But anytime I would see fighting, anytime I would see martial arts or anything like that, it just lit a fire in me. Like, oh, I just, something about it always spoke to me. And always, it was always like, maybe one day, maybe one day, maybe one day, that kind of thing that we always do. um, but I always put it off for a lot of reasons. I was a very quiet, shy, small, skinny, depressed kid. So to go out and do something like that was so far from the realm of possibility in my mind. And I gave myself every excuse in the world about why it was ridiculous, why I couldn't do it, why I'd never make it. And then um, when we were in Vegas, it was 1996. I actually went to a gym and asked them about signing up. I was like, oh, maybe I'll just go check it out and see what it's like. But then when I found out how expensive it was going to be, because even at that age, I was like, I'm getting a late start to the game because I wanted to do it to fight. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it to get in the ring, not just do it for just screw around or whatever. And I already did feel like I was pretty old at that point to be starting, having never done anything prior to that. And when I found out how much it was going to be to take like private lessons and get the real one-on-one training that I would need in order to get in the ring as quickly as possible, it was just like, there's just no fucking way. I had no money. I was a kid, you know, and not to mention all those other things, all those other fears and doubts that I had, you know, and this just gave me one more rationalizations about why I couldn't make it. I'm like, oh, well, you see, it's too expensive, so you can't do it. And then, you know, I left, you know, kind of feeling defeated, but also I rationalized that it was out of my hands almost, you know. It's like, well, I would do it if only X, Y, and Z fell into place. You know? So, you know, I went back to just living my life the way I was living it. And, but every time a fight would come on, it would light that fire again. I'm like, shit, man. Like, you know, it's like beating my, you know, it's like gnawing on you. Like you should be doing this. You should be doing this. And I would just have to drown it that much more with alcohol and everything else that I was doing, just trying to like get this dream out of my head. So I didn't want to have to face that. You know, it was too difficult for me to realize that I did have a choice in the matter. You know, like you tell yourself all these things, like you can't do anything about it. You're too old. You're too weak, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's all on you, and you have a choice to make, and you don't. And that I think that's one of the major things that leads to so many people's depressions and the difficulties they go through is not taking accountability in the things that they do have control over. Because there's so many external reasons about why you can't or shouldn't. Everybody's got that though, you know. And then going into 2000, I was almost in this. What would have been a fatal car accident, but missed by mere inches. And that, to me, it was such a big wake up call to me, because I never thought I was going to live very long, and I never thought I was going to live to see the year 2000. And when that almost happened, it was like an hour before New Year's. I was like, that was it.
And you're 19, right? You're 19.
Yeah, 19. Going into 2000, the year two. I never thought I would live to see the year 2000. So yeah, this was. I was 19 in 1999. And then that happened, and it was a giant wake up call for me, but unfortunately not enough of a wake up call for me to actually like get up and go after it. But it hit me, and like it was a really like looking back, I can see how all these things added up over time. It wasn't just one singular thing, you know. And then going into 2003, end of 2002. A bunch more like really bad wake up calls were happening. Friends were dying and going to jail. I almost got in another fucking really bad accident. Almost got pulled over, drinking and driving. And it was just like every time it was like, how many chances do you think you're going to get? And
just so many.
I'm like, I already got a million, you know, at this point. And then one of the things I had left out was back in 1999, one of my best friends had passed away, and he was the only person I'd ever even told that this was something that I wanted to do, because I never even dared to voice it to anyone, even out loud. I wouldn't even say it. You know, I just think it in my head. And he, when I told him, he didn't laugh at me. He just was like, well, why don't you do it? You know? And again, it's like people look at me now and they wouldn't think it's that weird of a thing, you know, but if you knew me back then, it's so far from who I was that it's just like, what are you going to do? You're going to go fight in the ring? Yeah, all right. Sure you are. You know, but he didn't laugh at me. And he encouraged me. And he's like, yeah, you should do it. He's like, I think if anybody can do it, you can do it. And I don't know why he thought that, because I didn't think that. But and that always stuck.
That's a good thing, man. No, you know, if there's one thing, I'm sorry to cut you off. If there's one thing I've learned in life, there's about 3 guys that gave me chances in my life. They saw something in me that I did not know existed, but yet they were 100% right. All I needed is somebody to believe when I didn't, and that's all he did, because we all know what happened, right?
So. Yeah. It's like someone's got to. It doesn't even necessarily need to be a person. It can be a thing. It can be an idea. You just plant that seed, and it stays buried underneath you. But eventually, that's going to grow, and it's going to burst its way out. And unfortunately, I was letting it burst out in really negative ways, because it's like I always say that everything gives us energy. It's a matter of which direction we point it in, whether it's a positive or a negative thing. So I had this burning in me. I was just pointing it in really self-destructive ways. And fortunately, I was more self-destructive than externally. But eventually that attributes to external damage as well. Anyway, so that my buddy that I told about that, he passed away in 1999, and then so this was actually a couple months prior to when I almost got in that car accident. And when he passed away, I promised myself that I'd go after this dream. I was like, you didn't even get the chance to fail at a dream, and here I am, too afraid to even try. I was like, I can't. It doesn't matter how afraid I am. It doesn't matter all these excuses I am. I have to do this. If not for me, then at least for you. And I promised myself that I would do it. Unfortunately, his death sent me right over the fucking cliff of the edge I was already on, and it just got really bad. So, but yeah, like I said, going that near car accident in '99, and then the succession of really awful things going into the end of 2002. It was finally like, you've wasted so much of your life already. Now think of how much of your life you wasted from the point you promised to live for somebody else. It's like, if my friend was still alive right now, he'd beat the fuck out of me for pissing my life away just because I'm too afraid. I'm too afraid. It doesn't matter what any excuses are. It doesn't matter my age. Doesn't matter anything. I'm too afraid to go forward. And I just, from that point forward, I couldn't pretend anymore that I didn't have control over these things. And regardless of how scared I was, and regardless of how many reasons I had, I turned everything into you're either going left or you're going right question. And I knew which way left led to, and I refused to go that way any longer. I was like, I just took that debate out of my mind. That from that point forward, it was almost like fear and pain and doubt and circumstances, they didn't matter anymore. The only question was, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You're either going to do this or you're going to do that. There's no in between. Make a decision and go that direction. You don't need to go all the way in that direction, but you got to start moving towards it. And so that was the first week of January 2003. I got in a gym, and that's 20 years ago.
That's their Master Toady, right?
Master Toddy, yeah. Master Toddy.
Because that's crazy. 2003, that means 2003, you're 23 years old.
Yeah, so I was actually
that's
22.
Crazy.
Yeah, my birthday was July, so I started at 22, and then I had my first fight that September, which was 23.
That's crazy, because the amount of success that you've had in that short span of time is absolutely ridiculous. I did not realize that you only started Muay Thai at 22 years old.
Yeah, not a lot of people really know that. I think they know that I started late, but not that late.
Does that explain why you fought the way you fought? Because one of the things that I absolutely love about the way you fought, it was balls to the walls. Like that. Have you ever been in a boring fight? I don't think so. Win, lose, or draw, somebody's getting cut, somebody's getting knocked out. There's no, you had no intentions to leave it in the decisions of the judges. That's something that I really, really loved about the way you fought. But is it because you started late? Is it because you had a sense of urgency to say, I don't have that much time left, so let's make it happen. Let's make this shit real.
Certainly, a lot of those factors contributed to the way that I fought. I mean, one, I've always been an aggressive, athletic person. So when I would play sports, I would always get fouled out every time. Not because I would necessarily hurt people. I was just very physical and aggressive, And I think a lot of that too was I was compensating for the fact, coming up in sports and stuff. I was compensating for the fact that I was so small. I was I'm not like I'm a big guy now, but when I was a kid, I was extremely tiny, like really tiny. I didn't even start growing until I was like 16 or 17. And that all that I ever had to rely on was my speed, my athleticism, my refusal to give up. And that's what I did in sports. And then when that came to fighting, yes, I knew how far behind I was. So I always felt that sense of having to play catch up, whether it was
Yeah.
training, whether it was fighting. I knew how far behind I was from where I should have started from.
Yeah.
So it's like every second of every day, whether it's in the gym or out of the gym, was geared towards getting into the ring and getting as good as I could possibly get to. And that never went away throughout my entire career, because I always knew how far behind I was. I don't have time to sit around or not push myself. I don't have time to take it easy or not fight the hardest people I can possibly fight, because I don't know which day is going to be my last.
Yep.
I don't know how long that I have. Do you know how long you have? I don't. So I was
Nope.
like, every single second to me, every single second since I turned my life around, I have viewed as extra credit. And because of that, it helps me manage a lot of those fears and anxieties that I think all of us have. It's not to say that I don't feel them. I'm just able to process them, and I put them into that question paradigm of, what are you gonna do about it? It's not a question of whether you're scared. It's not a question
Yep.
of whether you're in pain or the odds are stacked against you. So what? What are you gonna do about it? Nobody cares about that. What are you gonna do about it? Because it's all on you anyway. And that really helped me push myself constantly. Never be afraid to go up against any of these people, because I always put it into that context. It's like, you're not supposed to be here anyway. And I would say that about all people, even if they didn't have a crazy life like I did, is none of us are supposed to be here, and none of us know which day is going to be our last. So why are you fucking around and succumbing to all these external things that, like, we're so afraid of things that most of the time aren't even going to happen.
This is what being it's a thing that maybe you want to touch on, because I know I've spoken to a lot of fighters and they normally have no shame in saying it, but we expect fighters to be fearless. This is why you're the perfect example to speak about fear, because we think that I fought as an amateur. I didn't fight to the level that you did, but I know that from world champion, they were still scared before every single of their fight. They're like, "Oof, this is gonna be it. This is gonna be a tough one." Like there's a certain sense of nervousness, and call a spade a spade. They're scared. They don't know what's gonna happen. They hope for the best, but that never stopped them from stepping in that ring. Right? This is what courage is all about: facing your fears, doing what needs to be done, even though you're
Yeah.
scared. Were you still getting scared? Were you scared of fighting?
Well, to add to what you said, yeah, the only difference between the people that make it and the ones that don't is those people are willing to go through that fear,
Yep.
that pain, that doubt, those losses, those injuries. That's the only thing. That's the only thing. That's the only distinction I've ever seen in the ones who make it and the ones who don't. And fighting is such a great example of that, because it's not the most talented person that
No.
I don't think I was talented necessarily. I was just willing to do more. I was willing to push myself, and I was willing to overcome whatever obstacles were in front of me, because we forget there's this giant spectrum of what it takes to be successful, and all of us have different pieces of that puzzle and different percentages of good and bad and all that. And whatever you're lacking, that you can either grow in that area or you can overcome with something else. And that's something that I realized along the way is I might not have the experience, I might not have the age, but can I make up for that in other areas? And most of the time that you can. And that again comes down to that accountability and willingness to take control of the things that you have control over, and stop pointing to these external reasons about why you can't make it. And as far as fear goes, like I said before, I just had that very strange relationship with it. So to me, I think because I processed it so quickly, it never really felt like fear to me. It's like,
Okay.
this is what it is, and it just was normal to me. So I saw every fighter, even the highest of the highest level, prior to when they'd go and fight, and they were fucking nervous as shit.
Yep.
Some of them like freaked me out, because I'm like, How fucking you be that nervous? And again, I've always felt like a very much a weirdo when it came to that and the way that I handled it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Every single fighter I've ever known, regardless of the level, was scared. And more than anything, the higher up they were, the more scared they would get, because the more you realize what can happen to you, the more it's happened to you prior. It doesn't go away. It gets worse. You just learn how to deal with it better. That's the only real difference. People don't lose fear.
No,
they just learn how to process it. That's all.
Or they know how to process this. They know how to deal with it. They understand that it's going to be there no matter what. You can't change that. I can't change the fact that I'm going to be scared of things. All I can change is, do I do something about it, or am I a bitch and I'm going to let my fears tell me what I can and cannot do, right? Because at the end of the day, that's all it is. As you said, it falls on the individual. Stop blaming the people around you and take responsibilities for your action or your lack thereof actions. Do you see do you see the chat, man? Because I don't know the interface that you have, but do you see all the chats on the right side?
Oh yeah, I can see them.
Because people are calling you a Huggy Bear, and I'm curious to know what the hell that means.
That's my nick. It's one of my nicknames that I've had for like since the beginning. One of my buddies that I used to train with, his name was Anthony Brown. He gave me that nickname way back in the day. He would call me Huggy Bear because he said I should come out to the ring dressed like Huggy Bear from back in the 70s, and like dress up like a pimp with all these girls and stuff. And he used to just love to give me a hard time about everything, and that just became my nickname because he always called me that. And he called me that. He made sure everyone could hear it too.
So it's not because you like to clinch. It's not that.
No.
Because I thought that was it. You just like to hug people from up close and throw elbows.
I hate clinching. Actually, I mean, I love clinching in training. I hate doing it in a fight.
Why is that?
I think because I like to fight in a very high-paced, aggressive way. Where clinching is it's a completely different dynamic. It's
slower. Yeah,
it's wrestling. Slower. It's grinding. I mean, I love to train it though, because I love to be good at it. I love all the physical aspects of it. But when it comes to like fighting, like I want to go. I want my foot on the gas pedal and just going.
Do you have to remind yourself that in the fight? Because I can remember of multiple fights where you got cut. You're like, seems like you boost the intensity even more. You're like, okay, that's the game you want to play, motherfucker. Okay, let's do this. Were you conscious of that? Were you mentally conscious that you're stepping the gas all the time when you're fighting, or is it just natural? You just do it because it's your nature.
Well, both. I mean, it comes through, one, your nature. Two, the way that you train is the way that you're going to fight. If you're not pushing yourself in the gym, you're not going to push yourself in the ring. And I think that's where a lot of fighters fall short and a lot of people fall short is we think that once the spotlight is on us and once we're in this extremely difficult situation, that we're going to perform better than we did in practice. My Toddy used to say, he's like, you have to be 75% or 100% in the gym so you can be 75% in the ring, because you're not going to be better if you're not willing to push yourself in the gym where it's safe, where you don't have risk of serious injury. We don't have risk of losing. We don't have risk of people watching in your career on the line. If you can't push it when things are safe and easy, what makes you think you're just suddenly going to be able to turn the gas on when you get in there? So that was just, and I think I understood that from day one. So I pushed myself to such a extreme extent, and I never really could understand why other people didn't, even high level people. But I always did have that internal fire of you got to do more, you got to do more, you got to do more, because I knew how far behind I was, So I knew this was the one thing that I do have control over, is how hard I fucking train.
Yeah.
And how hard I push myself and how good I take care of myself and how healthy I can be. So everything that I did have control over, I took control over. And that's what pushed me to the level that I got to. That's what allowed me to stay in the sport as long as I did, because I took care of all those things. And most people didn't, because they relied on their talent, on their strength, on their size. And I saw very early on how those things eventually inevitably even out to everyone.
Yep.
Talent,
Yep.
talent, if that's not coupled with hard work and dedication, talent is one of the cheapest things on the planet.
How many guys have I played? I played competitive basketball throughout my youth, and how many guys have I seen that are my size now? They're 205 pounds of muscle, never trained a day in their life. They've never been to the gym. They never done anything. They're just genetically gifted, but they never pushed it with ethics. They never couple that with a great coaching, great ethic, just hard work. I can only imagine, like, look at the top tier athletes. Those guys do it. A lot of them are genetic freaks, and on top of that, they have a work ethics that almost nobody on the planet has. It's amazing to see real talent, because you said it yourself. You were a genetic freak, like you're somebody that's very athletic by nature. But I think your biggest asset
I
was
wouldn't say I was a genetic freak, but I was athletic. But it's not like I was big and strong, or a lot of those other aspects. I don't even none of my coaches looked at me as necessarily a gifted athlete. I was just willing to do the work. I mean, I was athletic, compared to a clumsy person who's not. But there's also some people who can. They just get it right away. They're already going. Like mine came from my work ethic and my discipline.
Okay.
So that translated to, oh, you're an athletic person and you're gifted. Like,
I got you.
Yeah, I am, but I can't just like get up and do that. That's why I train as hard as I do, because I know that if I stop, it just goes to shit. Where other people, I watch other people, and it's like they could disappear for a month and come back. They still got it. Like I'm fucking killing myself constantly to be at this level, and how hard I had to work and how dedicated I had to be. There was no, I didn't just have it. I had it because I worked for it.
But I think that's a good thing, though. I think it's a good thing that you lose it faster than others, because that means you can't stop. You just cannot afford to not train.
Yeah, you have to have that regardless. So when you can couple that with a naturally gifted athletic person, that's when you get the greatest. That's when you get that 1 percentile. But everybody else, they have some percentage of one of those things and another percentage of the other thing, and you need both.
Do you consider yourself a fighter, or do you consider yourself a martial artist?
I would consider myself both, really. I'm much more a martial artist as far as all of life goes. I understand how that translates to every aspect of life, but I think there is that extra piece of being an actual fighter. Like you can be a great martial artist without being a fighter.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
I think I'm more of a martial artist than I am a fighter. I just love to fight, is all.
Did you like hurting people?
No, that was part of my problem. I hated hurting people. I hate hurting people. I don't like seeing people upset. I actually, when I was a kid, my mom tells me that I hated playing sports because I didn't like to see other people have to lose. I didn't want to see people lose. That was also why I hated team sports, because I hated having to rely on other people as well. But I think if I was more of a fighter, I might have gone farther than I did, because part of my problem, I think, was I just loved it too much. Like I really enjoyed being in there and doing it. Like I want us to interact for as long as possible. So I enjoy that. We're like a guy like my buddy Joe Schilling. He's like, I want this fucking over right fucking now. Like I don't want to be in here. I want to knock you out and I'll go home. Where like I would love to fight all day, every day, because I take so much out of the that martial arts aspect of it. Like, it's coupled with violence and pain and all that, but there's something so pure to me about fighting. I don't think you are that connected to everything as you are in that moment, where you're never as present as you can be, and unless you're in a situation where like your life is on the line, your health is on the line. And there's something so beautiful and pure about that. I think it's one of the most amazing experiences there is. And, you lose yourself, you lose that ego side of yourself, and you just are there. You're just in that moment. The worst part about it, though, is like I have no memory of these fights because of that. You know, it's like when I watch them on TV or whatever, it's like, oh man, I don't even recognize that person, you know, because you're connected to a higher level when you're in there, and you're not the person that you are on the outside. You have to transform yourself.
Have you ever heard of the book, The Rise of the Superman?
Yeah, one of my favorite books.
Is that book not crazy? Because what you're describing is exactly, I don't remember what he calls it. It's not the zone. Like he has a different title for it.
Flow. He calls it
The
flow.
flow. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful state to be able to be in. But are you, so if you like that book, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. The interesting thing is I didn't read that book until, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago. So I understood all these things, that
Yeah.
concepts they were talking about, and then to hear them spoken about by a multitude of people from scientific backgrounds,
Yep.
athletic backgrounds, and all those stories that the athletes had, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. I never knew how to put it into words like that before, but then to see it like that, yeah, I've read that book like 3 or 4 times. It's amazing. I think it's one of the top books that I recommend for people to read, especially fighters, athletes, anyone
Agreed.
doing physical things like that, and just in general. I think it's a great book.
It was given to me by another fighter.
Oh yeah.
Do you know Jonathan Goulet? He used to fight in the UFC years and years ago with. He was in the same crew as GSP, and we're training, and he comes up to me. He's like, "You should read this because Zahabi, GSP's trainer, gave him the book, and then he recommended it to me. It's a great. You're absolutely right. There's nothing like reading a book, and as you're reading it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is how I should explain it. This is exactly how, if I could find the words, this is how I'd put it.
Yeah. I thought those same things when I was reading. I'm like, oh, somebody wrote out exactly how I feel. I just didn't know how to articulate it very well.
But how he goes even further and says that it's kind of the next step of human evolution is to be able to control that without necessarily the addictive component to it. Because a lot of the guys that are in the flow all the time end up killing themselves because some of the activities that those guys do is just absolutely crazy. They're nuts. Like those guys are fucking nuts. Some of them, at least.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we have to tend to go through real extremes to hit that level and push ourselves to that. But I think that's the cost that it comes with in order to get that. Now, if we could do that in a healthier, safer way, but I just don't know how that happens, you know, because I think that aspect of danger and risk is why you have to tap into that. It's almost like you don't have a choice. You have to let go. It's like there's this point in the fight where you're still connected to yourself, and you're trying to almost control everything that's going on. You're trying to maintain your breathing and your energy, and then when a cut happens or you get caught, you just click over to that other place. It's that other realm, and you can't just make it happen necessarily. There's things you can do to get there, certainly, and there's you can put yourself into a place, into a position where you're more open to those things happening, but you can't just say, oh, all I got to do is push myself really hard and I'm going to get there every time. Like, no, not really necessarily. That's not really how it works.
But it needs the death component. The way they tend to explain it is really that is what keeps you aware. Like I'm always thinking about that mountain climber that hopes here, and he's on the place by himself. He's doing a climb solo. If he fucks up, he's dead. But that is also a fact that if he doesn't pay attention, he's gonna die. His mind is just focused on what's there. Are you a spiritual guy? Because the way you stopped yourself from going there. I've noticed, like you're talking about being connected with something else. Are you spiritual?
Yeah, I would say I'm a very extremely spiritual guy. I came up in church like a lot of people did, but I got really turned off by religion and a lot of that group psychosis that humans inevitably deal with. I think, unfortunately, I think most religions have turned a very beautiful, pure thing into something really negative, dark, and manipulative, and that's always turned me off against that aspect. But what I did see, going back into it, was what these things are at their root.
Yeah.
And how those things can apply to all aspects of life. Like they don't necessarily have to have these put inside this box with these rules, and you have to do this, and you have to do these rituals, and you have to do it this way. And I think, unfortunately, human beings always want that ownership over stuff. Like, my way is the right way. You got to do it like this. You got to follow these rules. And I think it's one of the most unfortunate things, not just about religion, but really anything. We're all individuals, and we need to do things that work for the individual. Whether it's, you're talking about healthcare or religion or art or anything else, it's an individual pursuit. And anytime you try to force people or group people into this thing, it's only to make it easier for you to talk about that person. It's like putting people into a box. Like, you're this color, you're this religion, you're this sexual orientation. That makes it easier for me to define you. Mm-hmm. And it also makes it easier for me to demonize you and say, I'm right, you're wrong, or the other way around. So yeah, that is what's really turned me off to what I would call religion. But the older I got, the more I explored other things, the more I recognized what's at the base and core of all these things, and that spiritualism, and that being connected to the external realm, and more than what's just in front of you in this physical form that we're all in. And anyone that's gone to that flow state, anyone that's done like psychedelics and things like that, you understand how all those things connect, and how you can access all that even without drugs, like meditation.
Yep. Absolutely.
You can access that flow state. What that flow state really is just letting go. What you're doing is you're letting go, and you're being present, and everything is taking us out of the present. It's like our stress and our anxiety and everything that's going on in the world. We're so disconnected from who we really are as individuals and human beings, and the spirit that's inside us, because we're not connected to the moment, and we're not connected to the now. And the more that we can do that, the more avenues that we have to find that. It's like everyone needs their own kind of way. It's not like, oh, everyone should just do drugs and we'll be fine. Like, yeah, maybe a lot of people I think would handle it well, but then there's some people who don't handle that well, and their grip of reality, they're holding on so tight to that if you give them that, it can break some people. I think it'll break them in a positive way when they
agree
back up, but I understand why you just don't want to like pass that out to everyone and say, oh, this is the fix. There's more to it than that.
It needs to be done I like the ceremonial aspect to it. It needs to be done at the right place, at the right time, under the right conditions, surrounded by the right people, because shit can go wrong. Like, not that it's not going to leave any lasting effect, but it can be very traumatic for 4 or 5 hours at a time. It can be a very, very bad experience.
Certainly. And that's one of the positive things about it, more and more becoming decriminalized, because you stop viewing it as this drug. Like, oh, I just want to go party, and I want to go do mushrooms. And
because that's not what it is. That drives me nuts when people say, oh, I done mushroom at a party. I'm like, bro, that's not, bro, you're take that alone by yourself in the dark at home. This is let's use what it was meant for.
Yeah, and the more we can start utilizing these things for what they can be and are, I think the better human beings would be in general, is to understand all these things have their place.
Of course.
But they have to be used in the right context at the right time, with the right mindset, the right environment, and they can be really wonderful, powerful, life-changing things.
I think it's Joe Rogan that said that every single person that goes into politics should have to do either a heroic dose of psilocybin, do an ayahuasca ceremony. And I agree. I agree 1,000%. If you have to represent people and to care for people, show me that you care for yourself first, and let's do some ceremonies together.
Yeah. At the very least, they should have to do some kind of meditation retreat or something
Oh
disconnect again with the external and get
yeah. Mhm.
internal and yeah, I think so much. I think every awful thing in the world is that external drive, those external driving forces.
What made you is that something you're open to talk about? Because I didn't realize we'd go there, but it's one of my favorite subjects on the planet.
Yeah,
So
I'm open to talk about whatever.
what made you try? When did you try it? You did it as a party drug, I would imagine, probably like me
Oh,
when you
dude,
were a kid.
I was doing a lot of drugs
Yeah.
when I was a little kid. So I mean, I used to drop acid and do mushrooms on relatively weekly, bi-weekly basis. So I did a lot. I did a lot. I actually did. I did so much acid that I used to have flashbacks for years and years. Once I stopped doing it, well, I did acid for many years, and then once I did mushrooms, I was like, oh, dude, I'm never taking that shit fucking again.
It's not the
Like,
same, eh? It's
no. Very. I mean, acid's very much a chemical compound,
yeah.
where
Yes.
you mushrooms is so much more pure. Like you can actually do something the next day. Like go for
Yeah.
a walk, work out or whatever. But acid, you're just like you just want to die the next day. It's like a hangover. So yeah,
It's not natural. It's not,
yeah,
as you said, it's not natural. It's definitely, and the buzz is so different too. Like just the way it makes you feel is not the same. I don't have good memories of my LSD trips. I did not enjoy them.
yeah, they can be, and they can go wrong and do some damage. But again, if you're in the right environment and you know if it's made correctly and all those other
Yeah, yeah.
factors come into that. But yeah, mushrooms, did a lot of mushrooms too when I was young. But all that was a lot when I was younger. But I think that's also what helped. I mean, looking back, that did help me really disconnect from the external pieces of this world and really turn me off to that. I mean, I was kind of that way from childhood. I saw that path that most people are on or are put on, I would say, from, you know, whether it's school, church, etc. And you're just you just turned into a robot, into this
Yep.
factory, and be like, you do this, and then you do this, and you do this, and you do this, and then you die, and then the next person does it. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but I don't want any part of that. I don't even know what I want, but I know what I
Yep.
don't want. I don't
Yep.
fucking want that. And I started doing everything I could to go in the opposite direction. So, you know, it's funny, a lot of stuff that's been going on in the world the last 3 years. I was like, how did you guys not know this shit? Like I've been seeing this since I was a little kid. Of course, you know, the way I came up and a lot of that contributed to that. But I forget very easily that most people, this is all new information. You know, most people are trying to learn how to process this. I mean, the government's been doing this shit since their inception. So why is this any different? You know, it's not like this just happened today. And yeah, it's unfortunate.
The reason people are having problems believing in it is that there's only two sides to that equation. It's either they've never done anything wrong or
Yeah.
they've been doing things wrong from the beginning. There's no gray area. It's either they're there because they love us or they don't give
Mm.
a fuck and they're using us. Those are
Yeah.
your two situations, and that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Yeah. And well, for whatever reason, we tend to put everything into that paradigm of
Yep.
right and wrong, left and
Yep.
right,
Mhm.
where everything in life is a spectrum. Nothing is
Absolutely.
wholly one or the other. And I mean, I don't know. I guess that's just maybe it's human nature. I don't know what it is, but everything we judge externally is in that right or wrong thing, but internally, it's a spectrum, and it's a gray. Everything's a gray area, but that's not how we operate and interact with life, because we just have to put it into that box of it's this or it's that. It's not one or the other. You're either this or you're that. And hopefully people will start to recognize that in all things, you know, in all things, whether it's politics, laws, religions, everything, entertainment.
But I think that psychedelics is a door to that because there's no way bad
Yeah.
or good trip. There's never one of my psychedelic trips in my adulthood, not when I was 14 years old, but when I was wise enough to understand that I did not feel connected to every single being, every single particle in this universe.
Yeah.
How much time have I spent alone on ayahuasca, just laying down on the grass and feeling the whole earth breathe at the same time as me? Like it's hard to explain to people that never tried it, but I
Yeah.
don't how fast our differences would disappear
Dissipate.
if
Oh, yeah.
we
No
were to
question.
do 10%. Like 10% of people would do that, that would change the world. That would absolutely change the world.
Yeah, and the thing, well, the other thing people don't recognize about that is it's not like you have to do it all the time. You could do
No.
once, and it could literally change every aspect. And unfortunately, again, they're starting to. The truth of this is starting to come to light with the therapies and stuff. It's like they don't have to. You don't have to
No.
continually do this. It only takes one time for you to just completely switch your whole perspective of life. You know, it's really, yeah,
PTSD. John Hopkins been doing studies on PTSD, and they're saying 1 to 2 psilocybin trips, so 1 to 2 heroic dose, so 3.5 grams and above, will
yeah,
basically cure people of their PTSD.
yeah,
And when you look at the reason behind it, it's absolutely it's phenomenal what it does. It really just allows people to not be in a fight or flight situation within their body, and being able to
yeah,
finally face that fear head on. Finally,
yeah.
their brain is not shutting down. It's
Hmm.
staying up and allow you to face it. It's gonna suck. It's not gonna be a cool 4 hours, that I can guarantee you that. But
Yeah, yeah,
the time after, this will change you. The 4 hours will suck, but a week after that, when you do realize that you finally see it for what it is, it's life changing. And 1 or 2 sessions top changes most
yeah.
people.
Yeah, and then the more people understand this, the more they're going to realize why it was demonized and criminalized for so
Of
long.
course, of
Because we
course.
don't want a bunch of healthy, well-adjusted
No,
people that aren't connected to the external driving
no,
forces. Because the
no.
world would look extremely different if that was the case.
As soon as you, especially when, as you were saying earlier, as soon as you put the responsibility back on the individual to do their own introspection and to find ways
Yeah.
to better themselves, this is one of the perfect tool that you have. And as you said, it's something that can heal. It's something that's
Hmm.
preventive. It's something that you can't really make money off. Everybody can grow mushrooms. It's not that, it's really not that hard.
Yeah.
It's really not that hard. But do you still have the calling? Because I do it once a year, once every 2 years. Maybe I'll do it 3 times in a year, 1 year. It's really something I always, between you and I and whoever's going to watch this, I always have some
Hmm.
with me. I microdose 4 times a week, like I do my own pills.
Yeah.
And I always have some. I always have a heroic dose laying
Hmm.
around near me in case
Just in case.
something. Oh, but I haven't done it in a year.
Yeah.
But sometimes I have the calling. Do you get that? Do you get sometimes that
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
I
I
need
do.
yeah.
I don't remember how many years ago it was, maybe 5. I did DMT for the first time, and
Oh, that's the only one I haven't done yet.
that was fucking crazy. But unfortunately, when I did it, I just got to the doorway.
Oh, that
I didn't do
sucks.
enough. But just to like be in that place, and yeah, I'd love to do that again. And then I look at like ayahuasca and stuff, and uh, that's something I would love to do is go down and
You haven't
do
done
the
ayahuasca?
no, no.
Let's talk afterwards.
Yeah.
It's legal in Canada, right?
Oh yeah. No, I didn't
Yeah.
know. I know that like a lot of those things they're starting to decriminalize, which is nice to see.
But there are 3 Brazilian churches that have representative in Canada. They have some churches there.
Mm.
And I know someone that actually, he's totally legit. The government is aware, everything's good.
Mm.
I'll send you his info if you want.
Cool.
This is
Yeah.
life changing. If you've never done
Did you
ayahuasca, woof,
did you watch that How to Change Your Mind documentary
of
on
course.
Netflix?
I read the book. I read
Oh, you
the
did?
Michael Pollan Brick. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
great book.
they did a really good job of that. I mean, I would encourage anyone, especially
Mhm.
someone that's not educated in it, to see that and to see the therapeutic benefits of all these things that we demonize just in the way that we're brought up in this, well, again, you see why it's demonized. We don't want people to be healed and healthy.
Did you read, what's the name? I think the best book I've ever read, because I read a good 12 to 15 on the subject, is Dr. Shit, what was his name? He was the last, this is the one right here. So the name, Dr. Rick Strassman. Did you read the DMT, the spirit molecule?
No, I watched the little documentary they did on it though.
Oh,
yeah, that was
if there's a book I would suggest to people, if you want to, because he was the last guy in the 90s to have a permit from the FDA to be able to administer it.
Yeah.
And the stories that came out of those, hey, let's give you that much. Hey, let's see what's going on. Oh, you should take more. You should take more. See what happens. And the stories that people come back having spoken to aliens, like it's it's interesting. But what have you interacted with? This is messed up, and this is a fucked up question. I understand, but have you interacted with entities in some of your trips? I don't know how to describe, man. I don't know what I don't know what they are. So
yeah, no, I mean I wouldn't. I mean a lot of the acid mushrooms I doing was a lot like when I was younger and stuff. But not to that. I don't think I ever gone to that deep far extent. So no, I haven't been to that doorway yet.
When's the last time you've done some? Has it been a long time?
Yeah, I don't remember when I mean, I did like microdosing and stuff, but not to a high scale of. Yeah, no, I haven't done. Other than, I mean, the DMT was, I think that was probably like 4 years ago, maybe.
But you haven't done any psilocybin since then. You haven't done LSD, or you said ayahuasca. You haven't tried yet.
No.
Oh man, do you still meditate?
Sorta, yeah. I mean, I put my meditation in I don't know, it's kind of a different context than I would say. Just, I mean, I started a couple of years ago. I started doing a lot of breathing exercises. I went to this this guy in San Diego. His name's Tyler Forbes. He actually has a clinic out there. Man, doing that shit, the breathing shit, it was like exactly like doing DMT. And I told him after, I was like, we were in this small group. It was like 6 people. And I took him to the side afterwards because I didn't want to like start talking about doing drugs and stuff. And I was like, dude, that shit was like, it's just like doing DMT. It was like going to the same place. And he's like, yeah, I know, right? Isn't that crazy? And I do that pretty regularly. Like once a week, I'll do the breathing stuff. And as we said earlier, there's so many different avenues you can take to get to that place, whether it's fighting, meditation, actual drugs, medicine. There's a lot of different avenues to get there, and you just got to find what you're comfortable with, or maybe a little less than comfortable with, just comfortable enough. You got to have a little bit of hesitation. I think that is important to actually, because you have to get to that point where you let go, and the only way you can let go is if you have a little bit of fear. You have to let go of that fear. If everything's just like, whatever, I don't think you get the same results.
I've done probably 3 weekend ceremony in the past 2 years. I've done a few psilocybin trip. They scare the shit out of me every single time. Mushroom is the worst because it takes 45 minutes, an hour for me to feel it. And the whole time I'm like, oh, motherfucker, it's done. Now it's out of my hands. I don't know what's it's out of my hands. I can just, whatever comes. I'll deal with what comes, but it's out of my control.
Yeah, it's like every time, I remember, when I was a kid, it's like every time you do it, you're like, shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I think I changed my mind. I don't really want to do this right now.
Yeah, it's too late now. Not up to you anymore.
Yeah.
But it's, but I can tell you that I do it because it helps in my meditation.
Hmm.
I've reached certain level, like I meditate every day, and I reached certain levels in meditation that I could not explain. I could not explain how I felt. And my
Yeah.
first trip of ayahuasca with my friend in Montreal,
Mm.
I baited in that feeling for 4 hours. When in 10 years, I reached it maybe 3 times through meditation for a few minutes at a time.
Yeah.
It puts everything into perspective. It seems like it's really, it connects all the dots around us.
Uh-huh.
There's kind of no bullshit anymore. There's no assumptions. There's no, oh, but that doesn't sound right. No, it's
Yeah.
life is not that complicated.
Yeah.
Life is really simple. At the end of the day,
But
life is so fucking simple.
yeah, we like to make it really complex and difficult.
I think it's to make ourselves sound intelligent.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Everyone wants to have the answer to it. And like I said before, it's like it has to be this way, and I have to put it into this
Yeah.
box, and you have to think that it's this way as well.
It's the dogma.
Yeah.
That's the word. It's really whatever it is, the dogma that's behind religion, behind spirituality. Even I see it in psychedelic groups.
Yeah.
It's like there's
Yeah.
one way to do so, and you need to follow this way. Anytime there's a dogma, it's
Yeah.
problematic because what works
Yeah.
for me does not necessarily work for you or work for the other person.
Yeah. That's the human condition. Unfortunately, so many of these things that helped keep us safe when it comes to tribalism and
Mhm.
stuff like that aren't very helpful anymore, and they're actually counterproductive, extremely counterproductive. And then that's when we get into this group psychology, and that's why it's so easy to manipulate human beings because of that internal driving factor of tribalism, of safety first. If
Yeah,
someone can make you feel afraid, they have control over you.
absolutely. They can make you feel afraid, and you don't have the courage to go through it. Absolutely, you're absolutely, and it's easy to manipulate human beings to scare you and then sell you the solution, but your freedom is the cost.
Yeah.
That's
The ironic thing is we can look back throughout history and see how this has been done. Like, oh, those fucking people, like, what's wrong with them? It still happened. It happens right now, every day. It's happening right now, every day. We just give it a facelift and call it something different, so we don't think it's
yeah.
the same thing. It's the same thing.
If you have you heard of the book The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli?
Definitely heard of it, never read it.
All the techniques that you're seeing today, I think the book was written 400 years ago. He
Yeah,
came up with most of the shit that you see today.
yeah,
Tactics haven't really changed, just technology
yeah.
added a different layer to it, a different feel, and they're easier to implement. But at the end of the day, the techniques have not changed. Us human beings have not evolved that much in 400 years. We're still
No,
very easily manipulated.
yeah, yeah. It's unfortunately, but hopefully we can start to recognize this a little bit at a time, and more people are. It's just a matter of when that tilts over to the other side.
How do you think that's possible? How do you think do you think there's a way that, because you've been saying a lot that it's all about we tend to look for external forces instead of looking within, looking for what comes from us. Do you think
Hmm.
there's a way to help others because you become an external force, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a way to do it. I don't think there's a way to do anything on a mass scale that is positive, because inevitably that's going to turn negative. Even the most positive thing taken to an
Yeah.
extreme is negative, and that's why it's so easy for us to demonize other people, because we can't see the wrong on our side, where
Yeah.
every side has its wrong if you take it too far. Health has its wrong if you take it too far. That's when you turn people into robots. We're like, oh, you need to live forever. You're not connected anymore, but you rationalize that it's a positive thing because you're extending life, where you're not extending quality, and you're not extending what makes us human. So yeah, again, I don't have many hopes for it to happen on a large scale, but like anything, you just have to take it one step at a time, one person at a time, and you can't be so distracted by where you want it to get to, and you end up trying to force it there. Again, I compare the same thing to fighting. You can't skip to the end, and everyone that tries to crumbles and falls and never makes it. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and you have to go through the process. And unfortunately it's painful and it's difficult, but every positive thing in the world is painful and difficult and takes time. And that's just the way that you got to go. So the more that people are open to talk about these things, to communicate these things, to share these things, the more open other people are going to be. And it's a cumulative effect in that regard.
There's nothing like the individual changing, leading by example, showing the people around them how it's done by doing it themselves, and then you impact smaller groups and smaller groups and smaller group, because most of us believe that we're just one single person that doesn't have an impact, that what can I do to change the world? I'm just one person. Yet your world is not that big. When you think about it, the world I live in, I don't live on planet Earth. I live in a small portion of planet Earth. And if I can impact that group, maybe somebody in that group will impact somebody in another group and another group and another group and another group. And next thing you know, the world's changing, right?
Yeah. Well, all of us, we have to start with ourselves first. If you have any hopes of anyone else changing, you have to change first. And anytime we see something in someone else that we don't like, we need to look inside and see if we have that in ourselves. And if we're actually holding ourselves accountable to those same standards. It's like, I can't tell someone else how to be healthy if I'm not being healthy. It's, and unfortunately that tends to be the case with a lot of people, like coaches, teachers, people in the higher ups are telling everybody else what to do, but they're not doing it themselves. It's like all those piece of shit politicians breaking all the laws that they passed during like the lockdowns and everything. Like, you're not even going to do the thing you tell everyone else to do. You're closer to the source of the information than all of us are, and you're not even doing the thing you're making us do. The hypocrisy of that is apparently lost in a lot of people. But again, external things, we can always point to external reasons about why things are the way they are. But what are you doing to fix yourself? What are you doing to be a healthier, more balanced individual, a more connected, loving person? And if you're not doing that, then you don't have the right to point externally at other people.
Do you think that the wisdom that you're talking about, because those are very ancient truth, like we didn't invent any of this. This is just, those are facts that have been alive way before us, and they'll be there way after we're here. But do you think that you obtained that wisdom through fighting? Is that martial art that kind of gave you that perspective on life?
It's certainly contributed to it, and amplified it in a lot of ways. As I said, I think everything in fighting is a microcosm of aspects of life. And I think I recognized the translation between the things that I faced and dealt with on a small scale and how they apply on a larger scale, how they apply to everyday life. And it's like those things start to connect and make sense in your mind once you kind of strip that veil away of these things aren't connected and they're not related. They're all related. Everything you do is related to something else. If you don't know how to get good at one thing, you know how to get good at everything. It's the same process, it's the same path. The details of it may be different, so we think it's different, but it's not. It's always the same. It's the same thing for everybody. Just the external things look different, so we think that it's different.
But the reasoning behind it, the way it operates, is all the same.
Yeah.
What would you say to a 14-year-old that's going on your path? Because in my head, who I want to help personally are young men that don't have a strong male influence. I didn't have one growing up, and I want young men to be able to find someone that they can aspire to be or look up to. And you've had you've had a rough beginning or a rough teenage years, if we can say it that way. I think
Yeah.
we probably share a lot of stories when it comes to that. But if you could help a 14-year-old, if they would want to listen to you, because chances are they wouldn't, but I know I wouldn't have listened to you, but if you could say something to a 14-year-old, what would it be?
I think that all of us, regardless of our age, need to have something that pushes us to be better individuals, be better than who we were, to be stronger, to be more loving and caring. And it's certainly great if you have somebody in your life that can do that. And I would encourage people to look for the individuals around them that are that way, and to get closer with them, and to learn from them, and to recognize their example. But like you said, it's a very rare thing in this world. Unfortunately, these days, one of the best parts of technology is you can look externally a lot easier than it used to be. And there's so many resources, and there's so many people to talk to, and there's so many examples of why you're not alone now, as opposed to when we were coming up. You felt that much more alone. So it's there, the good and the bad come together. There's so much bad stuff that comes with technology and everything that's going on with that, but there's the good and bad grow together. They come together. You can't have the good without the bad. Everything in life is about balance. We want it to be one way or the other, but that's just not how things work. You have to take what that thing comes with. Like, everybody wants to be in the ring, but nobody wants to do the fucking work. Nobody wants to deal with the stress that comes with. Nobody wants to deal with the losses and the pain. They want it when everything's going well, when you're making money, you're looking great, you're knocking everybody out. But that's not how it works. You have to be willing to take. Everything comes with a cost, and you have to take that cost when you want to go after something. I don't know. I try to encourage people to be more vocal and honest. That's what I've tried to do throughout my career, particularly about those things that most people don't want to talk about, because we all want to be perceived as this person, this flawless, strong, brave, extremely talented and gifted individual, when we're all just human beings. We're all broken in some way, shape, or form. And we're all trying our best to hide that, which is the worst thing we can do, is to hide that from each other. Because if we would stop hiding that for each other, we'd recognize how similar we all are. We all have the same wants, but like we all have family, we all have friends. I don't care if you think it's the worst person in the world or the best person in the world. Everybody has the same thing. They want the best for their children. They want to be able to have an education and healthcare. These things don't change just because the person you look at you don't agree with. And the more we can recognize that we're a lot more alike than we are different, and we're definitely a lot more alike than the people telling us how different we are.
Oh yeah.
The better the world would be, and the more we could make this paradigm shift and put the power back in where it should rely, is in the people.
There's something called the bell curve, and it basically shows that 80% of people are somewhere in the middle. We agree on 80% of things, but we argue about maybe the 20 that we don't, that the differences between you and I, will argue on that instead of focusing on the fact that you and I agree on 80% of things, if not more.
And that's why it's so easy to control us, because as long as that's all you're seeing, that's all the news is showing, that's all the politicians are telling you, be like, you need to hate these fucking people, even though the people they're showing is 1% of that side of the equation. But you have to group that entire percentage of the population together. You're like, everyone that's in that belief system is that way and is that person. I was very fortunate to grow up on all sides of the country, on all sides of wealth. I was extremely poor to extremely wealthy, and vice versa. And when you get to see both sides of the equation, you start to recognize how similar we all are, and how a lot of these things that we're looking to these driving forces are just smoke and mirrors, and they're there to distract us. They're there to judge each other. They're there for us to put importance on things that have no importance. And I was very fortunate to grow up the way that I did in that regard, even though it was extremely difficult and, very traumatic in a lot of ways. But looking back, I am like, fucking thank God I went through that, or else I'd be a very different person today. I'd be one of these nutbags running around outside with a fucking bubble around them, scared of human interaction.
Did you grow up with a father? Did you have a father around when you were younger?
No, not really. My parents split up when I was, I think 8, maybe 10.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so it was me, my mom, my brother, my 2 sisters, and it was just us. And we grew up very poor, moving from place to place to place. So I can't even count the amount of different places I lived, different schools I went to. So I had zero stability in my life growing up, and again, that was extremely traumatic in a lot of ways, but it also exposed me to so many different aspects of life, which is incredibly important. The more that we can be exposed to these different lifestyles, different cultures, different religions, different people from state to state, from country to country, I think that in itself, like we should make it a requirement that everyone has to travel this many times. You have to meet this many people. You have to talk to this many people on the opposite side of the aisle. You're like, oh yeah, we're a lot alike, and people aren't that different. We like to think that they are.
Well, you said it well. We like to box other people in. We like to identify people for what we believe that they are. And then we box them in that little box and say, oh, I'm different than you. I'm better than you are.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, a lot of that, it's funny because all of us are judgmental. You have to be judgmental in order to live. You have to judge if that fucking light ahead of you is turning red before you get to it. All right. You have to be judgmental. But it's when you take that, when you're not willing to learn and grow from that. If every interaction I have with this group of people, this religion, this race, this ethnicity, this country is a certain way, good or bad, I'm going to assume that everyone's like that. Everyone in that group is that way. And until someone tells me differently, or if I'm not open enough to it, I'm going to assume that everyone's that way. And that is how easily it is to control people. But again, it's not necessarily a bad thing to judge, because you have to judge. But it's so easy to say, oh, you're a judgmental person, you're bad. And that's why it's so easy to control these things, where if we just need to be open to learning and to growing and to be wrong. And the more that we can do that, the better it can all be.
Being okay with being wrong, that's a big one. That is a very, very big one. That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
For all of us, yeah. It's tough.
But it's needed, though, because you said it beautifully, too, but I think the best teacher is failure and pain. To me, those are the best teaching. All the good that came out of my life came from hitting rock bottom.
Yeah, well, it's like the only way to grow in anything is for there to be resistance. Mm-hmm. So there has to be difficult. You cannot grow without resistance. There's not one thing on this earth you can grow through without that resistance. It's a byproduct of growth. There has to be resistance. If you want to get stronger, you have to push more weight than you did before. You want to get faster, you have to push yourself farther than you did before. And you want to be smarter, you have to push yourself more. You have to learn more. You have to read more. You have to experience more. Everything that we want to be better at comes with resistance, but we're so inclined to avoid difficulties, failure. We're not encouraged to fail. No. And a lot of that is in the school systems, of course, and the way that we come up. And unfortunately, there's so many aspects of life that you can contribute to just the way that we're brought up. And a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily in people's hands to that degree. And again, the more that we can recognize the way that it is, the more that we can educate each other about how we're brought up, these systems that we're brought up in, to not think. We're not supposed to think outside the box. We're not supposed to question authority. The people higher up from you, they know what's right, and you just need to listen and follow along. And all that is just came down to they needed good factory workers and people to
Yep.
get them. And at the time, it was important and needed in it, but it also is extremely destructive, and it's what will inevitably destroy us all, is that mentality.
That's the worst part, is that I quit high school. I was 15 years old,
Yeah.
and for the belief that I was stupid because I did not operate well in the education system.
Yeah.
I believed that I was stupid.
Mm.
Yet, you look back, I went back in my 20s. I became a sales engineer. I was at the top of my field, but just to say that nobody ever took the time to tell me, maybe you need to learn this way. Maybe
Yeah.
here's a book, go home. Here's a book, you have that much time to study it, then come
Mm.
back. I read 40, 50 books a year normally, if not more. But
Wow.
nobody taught me that when I was a kid, right? Nobody
Yeah.
told me that, oh, maybe you don't listen to that teacher because that's not how your brain works. Maybe you need to spend time alone with a
Uh-huh.
book, and then you'll figure it out by yourself. But yet a lot of people are in situation where they're pushed to believe that they're stupid because they cannot learn in a box. Like, they don't operate that way, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't fit in that box anymore. I feel
Yeah.
that it's more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I think the that aspect of life is starting to crumble, which is a positive thing in a lot of ways, but it's going to come with a lot of bad things as well. And hopefully we can put the pieces back together the way that they should have been to begin with. Yeah, I dropped out of high school, I think when I was 16.
Yep.
Um, I just I didn't see the point of it at all. I was never. I mean, I was always an intelligent person, and if I was driven to do something, I could fucking do it. The problem was I didn't care. I'm like, this.
Yeah.
Why do I want to know this shit? You're not teaching me anything. I don't see the point in this. And as I said about when I was coming up, I saw where this led to. It was like, I don't want to go where you're going. And unfortunately, we don't have a school system where we're able to explore the avenues that we're driven towards and our passions and things we're actually interested in. It's like you have to learn this X, Y, and Z, and it has to go this way, and that's all you get. And I think if we did that more with children as they're growing up and encourage them to be creative and to find the things that they love to do, we'd have a lot more people pushing themselves in the areas that they actually like to do instead of sticking everyone behind a desk and they're just waiting to die.
Oh, that is so true. There's not a lot of meanings in most of our jobs either, right? What we
Yeah.
choose to do, because it's amazing. I gotta say that you had that epiphany at that age to realize that you did not want to fit
Yeah.
into that pathway that was being created for you. That's brilliant. I did not realize that until my 20s. You figured out something that took me more time than you, man.
I think part of it too was I just didn't fit into that dynamic, so I
Yeah.
don't want to say it was necessarily like, oh, I was like, oh, I'm not this way, but I think that I saw all the reasons why I didn't fit into it, and I was like, fine, I'm not gonna fucking I don't want to fit into this shit. I don't want any part of this.
So you've always been weird, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always
but
been a
that's a
little weird.
but that's a good thing, man. Being normal to me sounds very strange. I'd rather be weird. I'll
Yeah.
embrace my weirdness.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody, the funny thing is, like, there's not a single person on this earth that isn't weird. If you get to know
Yeah.
people, everyone's a fucking lunatic. We just like to put on this facade, like, well, we're normal. I got everything together. I wear a suit. I got a job. I got a family. If we actually saw behind the veil of people, oh
Oof.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would completely alter our perception of reality.
Yeah, I don't see that happening though, especially not with social media being so strong. There's no way that people are going to be honest about who they are. That's
Yeah,
not going to happen. But again,
yeah,
that means that you need to admit to yourself that you're weird in the first
yeah,
place in order to be able to share it. It always comes back to the same thing. You got to do the work. You have to
yeah.
look inward and admit. What do you think about spending time alone? Because that
I
was the
think,
greatest
yeah,
teacher for. That's probably the greatest teacher for me was isolating myself in the woods. As fucked up as this sounds, that's what really did
yeah.
it for me.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. I think anything that we can um, take away, whether it's like fasting. Why fasting is so beneficial and powerful. You take away this thing that you're so used to and so reliant on. You start to one recognize what you actually need, what you don't need. You can
Mm-hmm.
reset your system, and I think that the more we can do that in all things, food, the things that we look at, the things that we listen to, the things that we experience. I just watched this really great documentary of Aubrey Marcus. He did this. If you don't know Aubrey Marcus, he's the guy that started on it. He did it was a darkness therapy. I don't remember where it was, like somewhere in South America. They basically lock you in this pitch black room for 5 days. There's no light. There's no there's sound, but you can't see anything. You're blindfolded, and it's just you with your thoughts for 5 days. And they bring you food and water and everything, but you have no interaction with anyone. And it was really, really powerful to watch that and to see what happened, like when he came out of it. And yeah, I think the more that we can do things like that, the better, and the more connected we will be with everything that there is. We're so especially with like light and technology, and we're so distracted by these things. We never have a break from them ever.
Mm-hmm.
You're never without your phone. You're never without a computer or a TV or a light switch or anything in that regard. And I think anytime we can fast from something, it's a good and a positive thing.
I spent 2.5 years in a log house in the middle of nowhere during the lockdown. I kind of
Oh yeah.
left the city. Yeah, I have an investment property in the middle of nowhere. I'm a
Oh
Canadian, so imagine the log house in the
yeah.
middle of winter. That's what I did.
Oh, that sounds
But
wonderful.
uh, scariest time of my life to be alone, that
Yeah.
far from everybody, but the best time at the same time.
Yeah.
And I would spend about my two first hours. I normally get up very early, like 4 or 5 o'clock. Now it's 2 or 3, but back then, let's say 4 o'clock. I'd
Uh-huh.
spend the first 2 hours with candles. I would read books. I'd
Mhm.
have my coffee, and I would just read under candlelight when it's pitch black. There's nothing else except that light, and it's the break you're talking about. The same thing as I've
Yeah.
been doing intermittent fasting for what, 4 years now, 5 years, maybe
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, I do the same. I've been doing it for shit, probably that long or longer. I do I always do a day a week where I'm not I put my phone away. I try to put technology away. Just go out of my way to take these things away from myself that we become so reliant on. Like we think it's
Mhm.
always going to be there, and we stop using it for the tool that it is, and
Yep.
it starts to become who we are, and we can't get away from it. It becomes an addiction, and a really destructive addiction. And that's why it's, again, like one time I did a 30-day sugar fast, and it was insane. The first time I had a piece of fruit, it tasted like I could barely even handle it. I can't have candy ever since then. It's just like disgusting to me. So now fruit to me tastes almost too sweet
Oh
because of
boy.
that. Yeah, it was pretty intense. And it actually like cleared up a lot of health issues I was dealing with at the time too. But yeah, it really showed me how we just destroy so many things by bombarding it
Yeah.
constantly over and over and over again. You don't even know how to enjoy it anymore. You're just like shoveling it down your face, whether it's food, whether it's social media, whether it's anything, whether it's money. You can apply that to anything that you want. And it's like, how do you even know what you want if you're just constantly bombarded with this stuff? Like, you got to take a step back. and then go back in. Like with anything that you're doing, it's like even if you're on this path, like when I was on the path to being a fighter, sometimes you're just so lost in what's going on, you don't even know which direction you're headed anymore. Like stop, take a step back. Doesn't mean you got to leave, but you got to take a break. You got to pull yourself out of that for a second so you can see the whole picture, and then you can go back in with fresh eyes, and you can take yourself that much higher than you were before.
But this is why to me meditation is so important, because of being in the moment and being mindful, always reminding those. A couple of years ago, I figured that coffee was an addiction, and I've been addicted to it for so long that I was like, okay, a ceremony of ayahuasca, they ask you 2 weeks prior to stop coffee. So I ended up stopping for more than a year. Only recently, only within the past 3 months or 4 months have I started again. But this is one of those things that you take for granted. You don't even question. People start the coffee machine before they take the dog out, right? It's like, start the coffee machine as soon as you get up. And those fasts are incredible. I don't know about sugar. That sounds crazy to me. I'm a sugar addict, man.
It was good. Like I've done it twice.
Crazy.
I've done it twice. It's actually really difficult because you can't even have fruit. Like
that. So even fructose, like even the natural sugar is a no-no.
Yeah. And you start to realize how much stuff sugar is in.
Oh yeah. Like,
holy shit. Like,
it's in everything.
And then on top of like how much more we put into it. Like, man, that's not good for you. So yeah, it's it's good to do those. I think anything we can fast from is important to do on a consistent basis, even if it's a really positive thing. It's good to take just a step back, whether it's a day, 10 minutes, whatever the case may be, just to give yourself that time away, so you can start utilizing those things for what they are and what they're supposed to be for.
Not because you can, but because you understand the meaning behind why you're doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
I'm gonna turn this light on real quick. It's getting pretty dark in here.
No worries, man. Yeah, it's a good thing you're not bald because that light would reflect.
Yeah, it would be shiny.
Yeah. Man, it's I did not expect us to talk about this. This is I always love about interacting with someone I don't know. Yeah. You never know where the conversation is going to go, but you're in Montana, right?
I am in Montana, yeah.
Because I definitely, since we spoke, I definitely want to come up. I want to come. We need to do something in person.
Yeah.
It's listen, bro. I really appreciate the time. I'm really. I know you have to go soon, so I'll let you go. But I really, really appreciate your time. Thanks for opening up, because not a lot of people like to speak about their psychedelic experience. So for some reason, that's a very taboo subject for a lot of people, and they don't want to put it out there because of the way it sounds, because you're a drug head now. But yeah, it's such it's medicine. Thank you for calling it medicine and not calling it drugs, because it's not drugs. They're not drugs. But yeah, man, I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. Man, it's interesting that I used to watch you fight, and now there we go, we're talking. So there is good thing with technology. This is only possible because of technology.
There's a lot of positive things for it, for certain.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. But, well, yeah, man, it was great to talk to you as well. I really appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, man. We'll talk soon. We'll have to do it again, but we'll do it in person next time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for the people that watched. And on that note, enjoy the rest of your day, brother.
All right. Likewise, man.
Yeah, man. Bye.
Okay. Yeah.